So we're going to start our chapter by talking about temperature. The definition of temperature is the measure of the average kinetic energy of the particles in an object. So remember when we talked about energy, we said kinetic energy is the energy of movement. So what is the average amount of movement within the particles in an object? So there's a relationship between the speed of the particles and the amount of temperature there is in an object. The faster the particles are moving, that means it has more kinetic energy. So the more kinetic energy it has, the higher the temperature is going to be. So the more they move around, the higher the temperature of that object is going to be when we measure it. One thing about temperature that you need to know is that temperature is not determined by how much of the substance that you have. It's strictly determined by the kinetic energy of those particles. So if you have a giant swimming pool, or you have a glass of water, it's not going to determine, the amount of water there is not going to determine its temperature. It's strictly what the average kinetic energy of those particles are that's determining it. This hopefully should look familiar. I hope by now that you know that we measure temperature with a thermometer, but we have 3 different units that we use, and one of them may look new. I think we've talked about it in the past before, but we've used Celsius in class. We use Fahrenheit in our everyday lives, but Kelvin is our SI unit. That is the one that technically in science world, that is what the scientists are going to use, even though Celsius is pretty common. Absolute zero is the lowest temperature that you can possibly have in the world. It's essentially the absence of heat. So 0 Kelvin is our lowest temperature that has ever been discovered. So make sure that I know that you've done these notes. Go ahead and write 0K next to where it says absolute zero, because 0K stands for 0 Kelvin, just to make sure that you're listening here. And the last thing here is some fun equations. So we have done these in the past, I think maybe a little bit last year, but some conversions of temperature. So to take Fahrenheit to Celsius, you need to take 5/9 times the Fahrenheit minus 32. To take Celsius to Fahrenheit, you take 9/5 times Celsius plus 32. Kelvin, all you have to do is add 273 to Celsius, and then if you're taking Celsius back to Kelvin, you can subtract 273. So we'll do some practice with those, but it'd be a good idea probably to write those down on your equation sheet now, because we will be using those in the future.